Welcome back to Real Talk with Tina and Ann. And as you can see, the background is different. I'm different. I look a little different anyway. I'm not this up close and personal normally. If you joined us for part one, you already know the emotional depth and hard-won wisdom that Rebecca Galli brings to the table. And if you haven't seen part one, you need to pause this right now. You need to go back and you need to watch it because this next hour continues one of the most powerful conversations. In part two, we pick up where we left off with Rebecca navigating what no mother, no woman, no human should ever have to go through: a life changing paralysis, the loss of a child, the ache of divorce. This is a story of humor and heartbreak, of choosing joy when bitterness beckons, of building new dreams with what's left when the original ones shatter. Rebecca reminds us that purpose doesn't wait for perfect conditions and that sometimes our most beautiful chapters begin when we learn to write with a trembling hand. So settle in because today we're talking about healing, what it means to truly show up, and how to live with uncertainty while still believing in what's possible. You know, Rebecca had everything in her life go against her in so many different ways, but she never stopped. She kept going. She overcame every obstacle. And, she realized, and we talked about it in this podcast, that moving forward is different for everybody. And just welcome Rebecca Galli into your world because this was such a cherished moment for me as I got to speak with her. So I want to just say right now, here is part two. Your dad had other powerful words. He said, happiness lies in the difference between being struck by a challenge and being stuck in a challenge. And that really hit me because that, again, is another perspective shift. I think we all have moments where we need to kind of pause and catch our breath and just be still for a while. But that, I don't call that stuck. Did you ever feel stuck during times when there was progress, or maybe you felt like you weren't really moving, but because you couldn't see it or feel it, but you were doing everything that you could?
Yeah, I came up with this idea of the power of better, or just better moments. And so it's like
Okay.
what was different about today than yesterday? One small thing that got better. It may not have been the best, it may not have been achieve my goal, but did something get better? Did I get
Okay.
the dog out on time, or get get the dog out, early enough for him, or did I wake up without the alarm clock, or did I make a tiny bit of progress and I let that count? I let that count that I was able to do something a little tiny bit better than the day before, and just uh, seeing that progress. I had a gratitude journal that I was doing, three things I was grateful for every day. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to track three things that were
Mm,
better today about than yesterday. So that encouraged that forward momentum.
mm. You know what? Making it that small sometimes is what we have to do. Sometimes we can only pay attention to the step in front of us or the step that we just took, to where it sometimes it is just, really honing in on a smaller amount of time. I really like that. Madison's journey with autism, of course, autism is very special to my heart, of course, but her story really touched me as an autistic adult as well. And I love how you celebrated her voice after she started ABA. And I loved her place in the family. I loved how Brittany wanted to include her in the wedding and the way that that happened, and then the photos that were taken. And it made me think of your mom as well because photos were so important to her. What were the parts of your kids that helped hold you up? Because they seemed to all hold each other up, and you held them up. But what were the parts that helped hold you up?
They kept growing. It was like I was waiting to know, after, especially after paralysis, I was waiting to figure out what I going to walk again. But they had their needs. They were 3, 5, 7, and 9 when I was
Mm,
paralyzed. And
mhm,
so Madison needed, well, at the time, that was 1997, and so there wasn't a whole lot about autism. And this is
Mm.
when I had reached out to a parent, sent home this yellow flyer in Madison's backpack, and that taught us about ABA, or invited us to her home to learn about ABA therapy. We used that with Madison, and then later that transaction of sharing information that wasn't available through a doctor or educator, that became the basis of Pathfinders for Autism, and that
Yes.
put me on that track, to work with that, toward that for 3 years before it was incorporated. So her needs helped me journey through my waiting of if I was going to walk again. So it was nice to redirect my energy instead of all about me to how can I help Madison.
That was so important. I love that part of the story, and that the Baltimore Orioles wives ended up, raising $100,000, which was the most that they had raised at that time. And then even Michael Phelps, here he is, he jumps on board as an honorary member, and then a radio spot for you. I thought that that was so great. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So we in the early days, we were just a small group of parents sharing information. We were trying to share our discoveries. And then in 2000, we were
Mm.
incorporated. We hired our first employee who had a child with autism, because at the time, everybody was saying, wait and see what happens. And
Mm-hmm.
we had wanted people to get as many resources as they could and talk to another parent on the phone. This was way before Google or the internet or social media.
Right. Absolutely.
So we started out that way, with just a person answering the phone, and we developed a database, and then we created special events to try to help raise money, and now we serve 20,000 people a year with
Oh my
family.
gosh.
Yes, some family events where people can go and feel safe going to the aquarium with their kids with autism, or
Mm.
long gardens, or there's different activities we have. And we also train first responders, whether that
Okay.
EMTs, your next encounter is going to be with a person with autism. How would you respond? How can you be sensitized to their needs?
Right.
So been great in 25 years. This year is our 25th anniversary.
Oh
So
my gosh. Can I
yes,
ask how Madison is doing?
she's doing well. She's 33. She
Mm.
still can't read or write or ever be left alone, but she's doing very well in a residential uh, group home. And then she has a day program as well, where she's out in the community every single day.
Oh,
So I'm
that's
very,
just great.
very grateful for those support services that Pathfinders actually helped me find. So they're still finding paths for no matter what age, because it seems like they always have needs that are at least outside my capacity to handle. So it's good to have kind
Sure.
of a safety net there to help you.
That's interesting that you called it Pathfinders, because you had this thing about paths, you know, two different paths. And then you just took coffee containers and you drew these circles interlocking, and then you created this logo, and then you came up with this. I mean, you were just so thinking outside of the box and trying to do something instead of just sit in the pain. And I just thought that that was amazing that you did that. And look, I mean, you're still now 25 years later. That's so great.
Yeah, and the path keeps going, and I think that the idea of a path is that sometimes it's just finding the path. They're already out there. We just don't know about them, so it's bringing it to light.
Hmm.
Pathfinders. Sometimes we create our own paths out there, but most often they're resources. It's just getting it in a place that people can discover it. But
When
it's a
when
very rewarding experience and we have an amazing staff now that are so
oh,
helpful and so have so much expertise.
is it just within the Baltimore area, or is it, nationwide, or what, is it pretty local?
It is a statewide organization,
Oh,
but
okay.
our database serves people from all over the world.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yes, so you can go
Oh,
to pathfindersforautism.org and go on there and search. You can search by age, what age your child is, and what services are recommended. And we have resources on there which are primarily in the Maryland area, but there's some, we screen the resources we add to our database, and we're open to others contributing too.
I might have to look it up when I get off of here.
Yeah, yeah,
So
great.
with your paths and rethinking possible, when you talked earlier about two different paths, you also did that with your own life when you were in the wheelchair. And one if you would never walk again, and one if you could. And I thought that that was brilliant. Was that your way of also creating these two paths? And I think you already might have answered this question, but was it your way of forward thinking during a time of acceptance?
Yes, absolutely. That is how I kept myself moving, because it was too hard to just wonder all the time. And I think that uh, you know, as Winston Churchill says, when you're going
Mm,
through hell, keep going. And to keep going, I needed to feel like that I could make progress. So
mhm,
I did the parallel paths. What happens if I could walk? What happens if I couldn't? And then I had a moment that I decided to give up on
mhm.
walking. This was 19 months in, and I think we had talked about kind of my big toe moment,
Yeah.
where where I decided that was the last thing I could wiggle before the paralysis was complete, was my left big toe. And after 19 months of therapy 3 times a week, I really wasn't making any progress, and I decided to just let go of that. And so I stopped my therapy, and
Mm.
I was able to lean in more fully to a life as a paraplegic mom. And I realized looking back that therapy 3 times a week had taken me away from my kids at the dinner hour for 3 nights a week. So I
Oh,
thought, well, I have that time now. And so I was like, we're going to do what I could remember from my mom's days. And we had candles with our dinner, and I played music. This was back with the CD clubs that were, so I bought a bunch of CDs that were funky disco that I loved in my college days, and then jazz, and then classical. And I felt like I was creating another environment for us to be family together. So, but I think we all in life sometimes have these big toe moments where it's like it's time to let go of something that's not going to be a reality for your life.
yeah. I think it's that leaning into acceptance instead of resistance. I mean, that's a hard place to be. It's crossing that line over into fully acceptance, I think.
It is hard.
Acceptance also had a different take for me in your book. Matthew had, and all he had gone through, and your miscarriages, and after your daughter Madison's challenges, and Peter's, and trying to manage as a single parent in a wheelchair, you know, your entire story of now you have your brother had passed, your dad had passed, you got the call about your mom, and you say you went right to acceptance. You had spent a lifetime of hearing this horrible news, and then going through maybe the grief process or whatever, the steps that you need to go to. But then you went straight to acceptance. And it made me realize that I too have been through so many things in my life that I think sometimes we just go straight to acceptance. And it's like that we become robots to pain. And it's just, okay, I know the drill. and you just go through the motions. Okay, now we got to do this. We got to the funeral, whatever. And you just are just so numb to it. And it's more something like that. I don't know. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, I think that sometimes when you have this unexpected event that's horrific, and then you move to this why, why did this
Mm,
happen? I don't
mhm,
deserve this. This isn't fair. All this emotional fog. Uh,
mhm,
but after a while, you realize that that doesn't really do you any good.
right.
It's an emotional thing. You need to process it, but at the moment, you need to like get in action for what is the next step. What are things that need to do, and I call it this pivot from why, and why did all this happen, and all the angst and outrage and that you feel with that why to how are you going to
Mhm,
do it, and how puts you into acceptance mode, and it just that change of question from why to how gets you more in acceptance, and I think helps you move through it more maybe efficiently. That doesn't mean that you can't come back to why at some point, but we knew
mhm,
our mother had a serious illness. We didn't know why. We did, there's a lot of more mystery that there was to investigate, but Rachel got there and I knew what I needed to do to address the situation.
mhm. Yeah, and I think it going from why to how gives you that sense of control. It's like all of a sudden you can do something with the why.
Yeah, you park that why and come back to it, but your how, it puts you in problem solving mode
It
instead
does. It
of
does.
wandering, or pondering. You're just gonna, all right, let's do it. What do you need to
Yeah.
do? Examine your resources. Who can help you?
Yeah,
How
that's what you do. That's what we do. It is. One of the things that I absolutely loved about your family was that you found ways to celebrate and have fun. And your family's sense of humor carried all of you, I believe, when your dad did whatever he did in the van, when and you got this van, you're going to go drive it for the first time, and you're in there, your mom's, I guess, in the passenger seat. That's how I pictured it. And your dad does something, and you just tip back and you're staring at the ceiling, and you look over at your mom whose back's to you, and her shoulders are shaking. And I thought she was going to be crying, and she turns around and she's like hysterically laughing. I was like, that is awesome.
She did say, "Are you okay, Bibi?" first before she started laughing. But she was, it was the perfect combination. Dad could tell a joke. I mean, he was a jokester. He just was. And Mother couldn't tell a joke to save her life. She'd tell you the punchline before she would tell you, the
Oh.
story. But she had this, we call it tickle box meltdown, where she would just cry, and with tears. She would just be laughing so she couldn't talk. And it really was funny because I was on my back, and at the time I was wearing these patent leather Doc Marten shoes, and I was looking up at the ceiling, and there were my legs. Of course, I can't move my legs, but they're hanging above me. Thank heavens I had my seatbelt on. So it was Dad was trying to use the hand controls of my car, which are meant, you have to be trained to use these things. Well, he just does, he skips ahead sometimes when he's looking at directions. So he just hit that thing, and the van lurched forward and I went backward, and she was a puddle of tears. But we really had a lot of humor in our
Mm,
household. We did. And when you were talking about being stuck or struck, I had written a morning fuel entry about that because I used it when that phrase when Rachel had come to visit me during I think it was late March one year. Anyway, we had a surprise snowstorm,
mm,
and she couldn't leave. She couldn't fly back home, and we were stuck. And instead of being stuck, we decided to go out and play in the snow. So I did,
mhm.
donuts with my wheelchair, and did snow angels.
That is so fun.
we were struck by the challenge instead of being stuck in it. So it
Yes.
really just gave us a lighter way to look at life, because sometimes it's just so
It,
crazy. It's funny.
yeah,
How can all this stuff happen? Why not laugh about it? We're
sure.
overcome, by grief and by anger. We can be overcome by laughter too. That counts.
Sure. Right, right. And I read that passage in Morning Fuel, and it was really funny. I pictured you doing that. Yeah, it was great. And you're right. You just have to make the best of it. You just have to. I mean, life is happening. You might as well laugh along the way. And
Right?
you had a dance party after your divorce. I mean, that was
Yeah.
awesome. And also, the picture in my mind of you trying to get ready in the bathroom with your friend and your sister for that wedding. And you know what? It was hilarious.
Yeah. We never did that again, but let's just say I wound up on the floor and had a friend pulling me up and Rachel shoving me to the side. But yeah, it was an interesting time in the bathroom.
Well, it made a memory, right?
Yes.
And when you were at that wedding, you had a moment, you were able to request a song and you wanted to play that funky music and you danced. And it was the first time that you had danced to that song since you and your brother, Forrest, had danced to it 20 years prior. So, what I loved about what you said was my body might be paralyzed, but my soul's moving on. I mean, how profound. Can you tell me about that moment of freedom?
It's I enjoyed dancing so much, and Forrest and I won the dance contest.
Mm.
I came back my first year of college. I came back, and he and I entered the high school contest. And I still have, I can see the trophy right there above my computer. Um,
Oh,
but it brought back. I could shut my eyes and remember everything I did with him, and so. I I loved wheelchair dancing, and I decided to
oh,
embrace that with, I can't move around the dance floor like I used to, can't use my legs, but I can have the music in my heart and let the
sure.
memory fill it and really enjoy it.
Yeah, it seemed like music was one of those things that helped get you through as well, besides laughter.
Yes.
Yeah, music is really important to me too. I can go back to a moment in time and I can, feel that when you hear certain songs. So yeah, they really do carry us. One of the things though that I hated the most for you, one of the things was how you were treated differently. And I touched on it earlier, but I, that column that you created from where I sit. Again, you were taking back power, but you have a story of being at your daughter's new school and nothing was wheelchair friendly. And you had even called ahead and asked for a ramp, but they didn't have the ramp. They had, thick rug. You couldn't get your legs under the table. You couldn't reach the food at the buffet. They weren't making sure that you were okay. And that really hurt me I was hurt for you, but you knew it would probably be hard, I'm sure, because, all these women, they're socializing and everything, they're leaving you out, but you showed up and even though that it would be hard, and then your dad's words from pity to power are perfect for this moment. Did you feel empowered by his words in times like this? Did it shift your attitude in not letting other people's heartless actions affect you?
I think it did. I think it has just been underneath a lot of the times where I've had to make that pivot from pity to power. In that particular instance, I at one point I wanted to just I was actually headed to the closet to just have a good cry, and somebody stopped
Mm,
and said something about Brittany, and and we struck up a conversation, and then she asked if she could help me with my plate, and then she sat beside me at the table, and then I started focusing on the needs of my daughter instead of my needs, and what I could learn from the community
okay.
was there, and there was real strength in that to to learn something for my daughter that could be used right away. So yeah, I did think about that. And it's another thing that mom used to say, and I just revisited this with a friend some time ago, and she would say, Becky, don't let the situation, don't let it get the best of you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let it get the best of you. And I would think about that even in that situation. Was I going to let that situation get the best of me? Was this the best I had? And was I going to waste my best, being sorry for myself, or I was going
Mm-hmm.
to find my best and use it in a different direction?
Mm-hmm.
So those words too, what is the best of you, and where are you letting that go? Are you controlling where the best of you goes? Are you the best of you
Hmm.
with an outburst of anger? The best of you goes
Hmm.
with envy. The best of you, where is that best of you going? And of course, we want our best to go in a positive direction. We want people to see
Mm-hmm.
our best, and we want our best to absorb what's around us, perhaps to help
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. If it didn't help in me, I would might as well help my daughter. And so that was the biggest shift there. But I almost went home. It was a difficult situation.
Yeah, and I hope that that places are more wheelchair friendly for you and that you feel more accepted. I mean, that was just not okay. I was angry for you.
And they learned from it. They did, I must say, they learned from it. And the next
Oh,
time it went smooth as silk. So, and that's the other thing. Sometimes it's not, definitely they didn't mean to be exclusive to me. And if people learn and
okay.
they correct it. So I was deeply grateful that they were sensitive to that and even apologetic later for it. But at the time, there's nothing that can be done. You just got to
Sure.
go right to acceptance. How do I get through this? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever I'm going through a hard time or anything, and I'm going to remember your dad's words, um, don't judge a performance in the middle of an act. I just was like, wow. I That was amazing that he said that. I think, like I said, I will always remember that. What did you take away with you when he said that?
Think it's another version of trust the process where
Okay.
in the middle of something and you have no idea what the future is going to be, but to some extent you can influence the future by how you approach the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
act. If
Mm-hmm.
and acceptance helps with this, like there's some things you can't control, you got to release those and move to what you can control, uh,
Exactly.
and
Mm.
try to find the good things as you're moving through it. uh, but it's helpful, especially if you're feeling stuck, like the middle of the act. Okay, this isn't over yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to come,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully it'll be better than where you are at the moment.
Yeah, because there's days that if somebody judged me on that day, it would be like, yeah, it's not good. So don't please judge me in the middle of my act. I mean, I thought that that was beautiful.
That he had some great ones.
I want to talk about your dad a little bit more because he was so much of who you are, and cancer is a horrible disease. And that moment, I think, was one of the most real moments, what I call a Job from the Bible moment, when you have that real God won't give us more than we can handle. I mean, there are reasons for these tragedies. God is love. How can He allow all of this? I mean, it's real, it's raw. And those are the things I think that people do say to us sometimes in order to help in a really hard situation. And I mean, I had something awful happen, and somebody said, well, if you just give it to the Lord, everything will be okay. And I just went, no, it won't. No, it won't. I have given it to God, and no, it's still not going to be okay. So, do you think it makes our relationship with God less because we might shout those things out?
No, I don't. He's tough. He can take it. And the name of my dad's book that he wrote was "Sit Down, God, I'm Angry."
Mm,
This was after Forrest's death.
yeah.
Uh, and the backstory of that goes to when we were kids. I think I was 12, Forrest was 10, Rachel was 8, and we just gotten tired of being parenting, I think. And we went in and we saw mom and dad lounging in their bedroom and said, dad was sitting in a black chair. Dad, who do we tell off when we get mad?
Yes, I remember. Yes.
That he said, you can tell it, and he, thought about it. He said, what do you mean tell you off? And I said, well, you get mad and you tell us off. And he said, well, you can tell me off. And he said, no, we can't. You'll get angry. You'll punish us. And he thought about it for a minute and he looked at mom and said, when I'm sitting in this black chair, you can tell me anything you want and I will not punish you. So that became our safe place. At the time I said, Dad, when did we get started? And we just listed off every injustice we could think of. But through the years, it became a safe place to talk to him about, first car accident. Forrest had a little fender bender. Told about that, or the first night somebody had a sip of beer, or the first time so I was asked on a date, and all the angst around that. So and after Forrest died, and he had told that story a lot, his minister friends knew about that story. So when Forrest died, we were in the hospital, or actually, I think before he was unconscious 9 days. So during that time, Dad was in the lobby with some of his minister friends in a room, and he said, "Guys, I'm going to put God in the black chair," and he let God have it. Why my son? Take me, not my son. This is so unfair. And so this was a minister openly expressing anger toward God for something that was happened to his beloved son.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that honesty, that black chair, that place to be open with how we felt about tragedies that didn't seem deserved was something that I continue to experience in my life. And Dad continued to give me, it's okay, baby, you can be angry. It's okay. And
oh, how beautiful.
yes. So it was a gift he gave me, really, to be able to honestly express that. Otherwise, it was like a release valve. I had to express it, but still remain faithful. I say that I've been in relationship with God for as long as I can remember, but not always on speaking terms.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That sounds like another title to a book. That is so good.
Oh gosh, but he understands. He can take it. He does.
And I think your dad had a sermon. How mean is your God? I mean, that I would have loved to have heard that sermon.
Yes, it was a powerful one, and I think I have a recording of it somewhere. He did send me all those tapes, but yeah, it's when people say, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, or everything happens for a reason, or oh, you alone have the strength to deal with this. God gave you this. It puts God in not a companion position. And Dad always said, look for God not at the point of cause, but at the point of cure, how he can help you get through a situation.
That's just so beautiful. Also, your mom, she had a little bit of a moment herself when she was just really tired of people asking her how she was. And, I mean, I felt that for her in that, that people are really just being nice when they're asking that. But she's like, well, how do you think I am? And I think that we all need to just let that out. People are trying to be nice, but it's really hard to present that face of like, I'm good. I'm good, especially after she had lost her husband. That would just be horrific. And, she just wanted to let that out.
Yes, it was really beautiful how she pivoted on that one, because it was the simple question people were asking, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where she expressed what you said, how do they think I'm doing? I lost my husband, blah, 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 the whole. So I was trying, for several phone calls, I was trying to be very careful about not ask that question. And she, at one point, I slipped and I said that, how are you doing? I thought, oh my gosh, I've triggered her. Just here we go. And she goes,
Mm,
well, baby, I'm a doing. That's how I'm doing. I'm a doing. And I thought, what a beautiful thing to say, just not I'm fine. I'm a doing. I am doing what's
mhm.
what's next, what I need to be doing. And that kind of became kind of Rachel and our code word as we're talking to each other. How are you? And if you're a doing, that means you're struggling, but you are. You're
Yeah,
not fine, but you're a
yeah,
doing.
yeah. That's a great way for her to answer during such a hard time. And I think I used to always just say, I'm peachy.
Oh, yes.
But I mean, I guess I was being smart, but I also really meant that, I was really just trying to keep moving. You went to your parents' house when you knew that your dad was not going to make it. And one of the things that I loved, this is again another one of those bitter, sweet kind of things. He met you outside when you arrived and you ran into his arms and you said that you wouldn't have missed his adventure. I just sat in that and I was just like, wow. I mean, what? I mean, I don't know if that's coping, but the way that your family would call those types of hard truths, adventures with uncertain outcomes. I mean, did that help you embrace the hard realities?
I think what it did was it allowed me to hold things lightly because when you're on an adventure, you're not sure exactly what's next, but it's an opportunity for learning. You
Mm-hmm.
know that the unexpected is probably going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And for the guy that says what's planned is possible, and my mother's saying was, got to get my ducks in a row. If you have plans that are too tightly held, when they go sideways, you're at a loss.
Mm-hmm.
But if you
Mm-hmm.
hold them lightly, then you can pivot more. It's those shock absorbers we talked about earlier, where you can absorb a little bit more, but you can also be open to what that circumstance offers. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things I mentioned in the book, and probably both of them, is one of Dad's things that he said that is similar is no experience is wasted unless you let it be.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you approach things as an adventure, then you're probably going to learn something here. It might not be exactly what you want to learn, but
Right.
that opens it up, the opportunity up. And it's a really positive way to look at hardship, but I feel like if you have that as a goal and fall short, at least you've aimed high. And maybe what you are able to achieve is just a little better than what you would have if you just think of it as a list that you've got to move through, a dirge. It's not, it's an opportunity too. And hopefully you'll something positive will come out of it, but it doesn't make the journey any less laborious, but perhaps it's more ripe with opportunities to learn if it's approached that way.
You're reminding me of when your husband did remarry, and that was a hard truth. And that was something that would have caused a lot of uh, walls to go up. When Cindy, his new wife, she showed up. I think it was some kind of a store, and she's like, trying to let you know who she was. And then she starts showing up at games and different things like that. I mean, that would have been so hard, but eventually she got closer to you. You let her in more. You spent more time with her. You even traveled with her. And it just showed me that sometimes if we let those walls down, we can let those hard things in. So it might be better than we think.
And it has been. It has been totally worth it. We are still very good friends. I can say that I love her like a family member. We've
Okay.
worked hard at that relationship. Uh, Initially, I think I was operating in my children's best interest because I felt like it would be too hard for everything that my kids have been through to try
Yes.
to absorb my dislike of their father's choice for his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And there were many things about her to love. It was easy to lean into that. She was respectful of me. She was helpful to my children. She cared for my children. So it's all about that focus. Like, what can I focus on for her, with her? And she's a lovely human being. I'm glad she's in my life. But it was not an easy choice to. I take that back. After a while, it became a very easy choice to choose my children and their welfare over my, hurt or whatever I felt at the time. Um, it was easy to look at their best interest, and uh, she wound up being pretty easy to love.
And I think that that's another theme that kind of runs through your books. I know what your dad said in putting yourself first, but you always took your whole entire family's situation into account while you made decisions. I think that that really says a lot about who you are.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I will say one of the things Mom talks about was her one of her favorite actresses was Sophia Loren,
Okay.
and they would they ask her, how do you fall in love with so many men in all the movies that she had?
Mm,
And she would say, I find something about them to love, whether it be their eyes or their lips or their hair, or
mm.
and focus on that part of them as she's portraying this love. And I think it led to my idea that everybody sparkles in a different place, that to look for people's sparkle.
You said that in one of your morning fuels.
Yes, yes. So, and I decided, to look for people's sparkle and let my sparkle show more. And that's when I bought some gold sequin boots. And somebody had said, when you're paralyzed, in a wheelchair, if you can't stand up, stand out. And so I'm like, I like my blingy jewelry and I like my sparkle boots. And, it's fun. It's fun. And sometimes you just gotta go with what you got, right?
You do, and you do. A couple more things and then we'll end. But I wanted to touch on something that you said about anger. Rightfully so, you were angry. And you heard in Ernie Larson's self help tapes that unresolved anger has adverse effects. And all it does is fixate us on the point of the pain. So, can you talk about not focusing on the point of pain?
Yeah, I loved his illustration. He talks about unresolved anger fixating you in your point of pain, much like those projects in science class where you would have the insect and they would have the little pin through them, and that you need to take that pin out. That's what it's like to take the pin out of something that's fixating you in your pain. So I think again, it's that process of being honest about
Mm-hmm.
I'm in pain. Uh, it's honest about your capacity to deal with that pain and who can
Mm-hmm.
come around you to help you relieve that pain and work through that pain. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's really important because this unresolved anger can pop out in different ways you don't even
Mm.
know.
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
whole thing about you're angry and you kick the dog, and it's like it wasn't the dog's fault. It was, I would never kick my dog, that's for sure. But idea of
Right.
that it permeates in your attitude and
Yeah.
your countenance. You need to really figure out a way to get that out, the unresolved anger.
Yeah. And it will come out, it'll just shoot out in different ways and hit people and things in a way that, it's just not productive.
Right.
I have to mention this really hard moment, but it's also again another beautiful part to your story where your sister Rachel kind of brought something out, and your mom passed, and then Matthew's passing right after. Could you tell that story and what Rachel said to you?
Yes. So it was another one of these, are you kidding me moments. So um, we knew mom was 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 at the end of her time. We had been told that that she could be dying in the next few weeks. Um, and Matt, my son Matthew, had been in the hospital with pneumonia. So these these were sequentially. I think mother. I'm not sure exactly the order of. I think Matthew was hospitalized right after um, mother. We got the word that mother wasn't doing very well. So I
Mm.
first got the call that my mom had died. And so I was making funeral arrangements with that. And then 6 hours later, I get the call that Matthew has died. And I just was stunned. I just was absolutely stunned. So Rachel was on her way driving to West Virginia to start making funeral arrangements for mom. And I called her and I said, Sis, you aren't going to believe this. Matthew died. And
Mm.
no, she didn't even say, I can't believe it. She just said, well, Sissy, maybe it's mom's time to take care of him.
Mm.
Ugh. And
Yeah.
it, it grounded me. It made me be okay with it
Hmm.
because it was just two huge losses within 6 hours. And so I called our minister here. I had just called him about mom's funeral. I said, you're not going to believe this, but my son just died too. And it's really hard to like catch a minister off guard, just because,
Right.
they've heard it all, but oh,
Yeah.
I really caught him off guard. So it was pretty amazing, but I've rested in that through the years, through, his mom is with Matthew, and finally, because he had suffered so uh, with the degeneration of the disease and the more frequent seizures, and he had suffered so it was really a comforting thought. But I don't know where she came up with that, but it was just perfect for that time.
Yeah. I think that she even said, that she had wanted to take care of him and she was just taking him with her. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that just was so perfect. I mean, the fact that they died 6 hours apart, it just really did feel like your mom just took him with her and she's got him now.
Through the years, she would remember, his birthday, and just remember his, anniversary of this and anniversary of that, and just in a very loving way, knew that she would let me know that he was primary in her thoughts, more so than
Hmm.
anybody else, really. So
Hmm.
maybe it all made sense what my sister said.
It really did. I can just feel your pain. I can feel, your bravery. I can feel just how strong you are. And I pictured a lot of your life at times, barely keeping your head above water. Have you gone, because it feels, but I'm not going to answer it for you. Have you gone from surviving to truly living again?
It's never finished. It's a daily struggle. Sometimes I think I live on the edge of a pity pit, but
Mm.
I think this there's a mentality of, even though whatever my latest limitation is, I can still, and really leaning into that. I can still do this. I can't
Mm-hmm.
walk, but I can write. I, I'm not comfortable in this
Mm.
situation, but I'm very comfortable in that situation, and
Yeah.
trying, because the aging process, complicates things. And so my goal is to live fully in this life I didn't plan. And my goal is to also
Mm.
live what I believe, which is life can be good no matter what, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and to try to seek that good and to live fully
Mm-hmm.
for that. So Uh, it's, I think I'm doing, my mom would just say sometimes, Bibi, you're doing mighty well when I felt like I was falling short. And I think I'm doing mighty well. I will say that, at least today, right?
Yep, sometimes it's moment by moment. One of the most shocking words that you wrote, and I thought about it later, I was like, well, maybe it isn't that shocking because you said, I would change nothing. Again, it just took me back to Forrest, but, this was a goal of yours, a mantra. You say we have to accept what we know and rethink the possible. You learn to live life with the lessons, and you had so many questions. Why my brother's death? Why my paralysis? Why my daughter's autism? Why my mother's and son's death at the same time? I don't know the answers, but I will keep on living even with the unanswered questions. That is just so beautifully said.
Thank you. I have a lot of them, but I think it's where we place them in our mind too. If we are always looking through the why instead of the how, or all the injustices instead of the good that we have left, it makes life more challenging than it needs to be. There's a way to manage that, but it's work. I say life can be good no matter what, but can implies work. It's not life is good.
Yes,
Life
yes,
can be good. So
yes.
there's effort in that.
There
And
is effort.
mhm,
Yes. And it is a two-way street. I mean, God does, he'll meet us halfway. And that's what I always say anyway. And sometimes he does 80%. And, but it does take effort on our part. What message would you like people to take from rethinking possible and morning fuel? What are the main messages that you want them to get?
I think that it is life can be good no matter what, and it can means effort. I think that it is a worthwhile pursuit to keep rethinking possible, to keep rethinking what you
Mm-hmm.
can do and work
Mm-hmm.
hard toward getting toward that,
Yes.
and that you can't do it alone, to please reach out to other people and let them help you in your journey.
Mm-hmm. How can people get your books? I got mine on Amazon, but do you have a website? How can people get a hold of you or, just read your books?
Yes, so my website is my name, Becky Galli, BECKYGALLI.com. And my books are available anywhere books are sold. That's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your independent local bookstore. And they're also available through my website if you want to look at all the places that they are locally or anywhere actually. And I also do a column called Thoughtful Thursdays that if they want to sign up for that, they would welcome them on Thursdays, sometimes every Thursday, sometimes once a month, only when I have something to say. I'll give a little thought for the day, something that's inspired or encouraged or made me think that week. And that's where your podcast will be. I usually try to feature some podcast at the end of my Thoughtful Thursday so people can learn more about what's going on.
Well, I think I'm going to join that email. So you might
Great.
see my email come up. I
Would
would
love
like to, yeah, I want to read more. So I absolutely will. Well, Rebecca Galli or Becky Galli, for those who are friends, and maybe I could call you that, you are proof that even with unanswered questions, that we can still choose to live fully. Thank you for helping us refuel when we feel empty. And, for all of our listeners, we always say that there's purpose in the pain and there is hope in the journey. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And I want to thank you, Rebecca, for being here today and doing this extraordinary journey with us. Thank you so much. And for everybody out there, we will see you next time.
Thanks so much. A pleasure to be with you.
If part one opened the door to Rebecca Galli's story, from learning to parent in a wheelchair, and I just can't even imagine, to building a nonprofit in the middle of unimaginable grief, to redefining love, resilience, and what it really means to start over. Rebecca didn't just survive, she created a life filled with purpose, impact, and grace. So here's what I want to leave you with today: there is no shame in falling apart, even in pain, even when all you have to offer is just showing up and being present. That's still enough. If this story resonated with you, grab Rebecca's books, Rethinking Possible and Morning Fuel. I've read them, they are amazing. Follow her journey at beccagalli.com. That's BECKYGALLI.com. And remember, your story isn't over. You may be in the middle of the mess, but the ending is still being written, and it's being written by you. Until next time, this is Real Talk with Tina and Ann. And as always, we say, remember that there is purpose in the pain and there is hope in the journey. We'll see you next time.